Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today for Man versus Machine, Who Conquers the Recruiting World webinar. I'm Ashley Schultz, the Marketing Manager here at ZoomInfo, and today I have the pleasure of introducing you to two of our speakers. But first, let me give you some background for those who may be unfamiliar with ZoomInfo. ZoomInfo is a growth acceleration platform delivering accurate and actionable contact and business information to empower your recruiting, sales, and marketing teams. Our business information data provides access to over 140 million people and 12.5 million companies with constant up-to-date information. And with access to direct dial phone numbers and email addresses, you'll be able to reach key decision makers, supercharging your outreach efforts and driving revenue. The Novo Group is a unique talent acquisition and recruitment leader, helping organizations nationwide attain quality talent through customized solutions that helps find, recruit, and transform talent to empower both candidates and clients to win. Before we get started, I wanted to address a few logistical questions regarding today's webinar. If you have a question, please feel free to ask us through on 24, chat, or on Twitter by using hashtag ZoomInfoWebinar. We will be emailing a recording of our webinar to all attendees within 48 hours, so please be on the lookout for that. Now on to today's speakers. Today we have the pleasure of hearing from Tony Stemen and Alex Hara. Tony is the Recruitment Technology Manager at Novo Group. He joins us with over 10 years of experience in talent acquisition, research, and sourcing. His training experience includes global sourcing and researching, Boolean training, in addition to being a panel speaker for Career Builder. Alex Hara is an enterprise account executive at ZoomInfo. He is passionate about partnering with recruiters to identify and get in contact with both passive candidates and new clients more efficiently. He takes a problem-solving approach when it comes to finding clients, the best solution that meets their needs. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to our presenters.
All right, thank you so much, Ashley, for that introduction. And today I'm going to be talking about the topic of man versus machine, who conquers the recruiting world. And really, it's talking about the balance between how much technology do we use and how much manual methodologies do we use in the recruiting process. And to get to that topic, we really have to talk about some of the challenges that are currently facing us in the recruiting world. Some of the biggest things that pull time from our day-to-day basis when it comes to using technology is really, the first thing is market intelligence. And when I say market intelligence, I'm talking about how do we paint a good candidate landscape of where are the best candidates at, what companies are they working for, what are their salary ranges, what are applicable titles, and how does that apply to our recruitment strategy. And with market intelligence, it can be a challenge because there's several different tools that we can use. Data that we can get through market intelligence can sometimes be really messy. And then we also have the challenge of how do we communicate that market intelligence, not just to internal teams, but also to clients or hiring managers that we're working with. The next challenge that obviously everyone knows about today is passive candidates. And I bet if I was to ask how we define passive candidates on the phone, we might all have a little bit separate of a definition. But in my mind, passive candidates are people who are gainfully employed and not currently looking for employment. And a lot of times our hiring managers really want us to target the passive candidate landscape. And it doesn't really matter where we find those people at, but how do we find the best people, and how do we make sure that they're good quality candidates? And so the passive candidate landscape is one of the things that we face. And then we're also faced with the challenge of we have all these great new tools and we have all these great new ways to find people, but how do we contact them? How do we find not only accurate contact information, but also what are some of the new ways that we can contact candidates through social media messaging, through new forms of digital contact, and then also what are the most appropriate ways that we can call candidates or contact candidates at their workplace. So we're really faced with these things, and if you don't have good efficiencies, this can be a big challenge for us, is how do we answer the question of market intel, passive candidates, and then also contact information. And it really leaves us with this tension that brings us to our topic today of man versus machine. I know if you go to the latest recruitment boards on social media sites, you'll see an article every once in a while saying why recruiters are going away because of automated technology, and then you'll see people arguing, well, no, that's not the case. I prefer manual methodologies. So we kind of live in this tension between the people that do the recruiting work for us and the technology that really gives us the cutting edge in the recruitment world. And in my mind, the challenge is even bigger than that. We really have, because of the technological landscape we're in today, we have new tools coming at us every week, and they all kind of promise to be the magic bullet. I know one tool this year told Novo that for $200,000 a year, they could be the only tool that we really need. And I know from being in this industry that there is no magic bullet tool. So how do we kind of balance the tension between the two worlds? And that's the challenge I'm going to be addressing today. And when I address everything, just to kind of give everyone a side note, I'm going to be addressing this through the scope of what I'm currently doing at Novo Group, not just to do a plug for my company, but because of the 10 years I've put into this industry and the thought leadership I've been able to be a part of and the learning I've done throughout every step of my career, I've really finally had a chance to build those things out and see how clients react to them at Novo Group. And so I'll be able to answer this challenge today through the scope of what we build out at Novo Group and how we see it impacting the marketplace. And I think to appropriately do that, the first thing that I need to do is define where these challenges come from. And all of these challenges that I just addressed on the previous slide of market intel, passive candidates, and candidate contact information, they really come at the front end of that recruiting process. And that is from the moment you take on a new position and kind of talk about that position with the hiring manager, all the way through presenting a qualified candidate to the hiring manager for the interview. So it's really the front end of that recruitment process. And at Novo, we call that research and sourcing. And just like the passive candidate, I think that we would all have different definitions of what sourcing is. I know every time I talk to someone in the industry, they define it a little bit differently. But at Novo, we had to come up with clear definitions of what research and sourcing were. And so we define research as market intelligence and data analytics that support the hiring process, and then also the ability to go and find passive and active candidates in unique and creative ways. And so once we have that market intel that kind of drives our strategy to find passive and active candidates, then we move on to sourcing. And sourcing is really refining that research to help produce warm leads. And sourcing is also completed in unique and creative ways. And this entire front end of the process takes us all the way from candidate identification and market intelligence all the way through presenting the candidate who's ready and qualified to the hiring manager. So when we're asking that question, man or woman versus machine, who really wins in talent acquisition? I'm going to start out with an elementary answer, and then I'm going to ask that you give me a chance to expound on that answer and really clarify what I mean. So the elementary or the simple answer is this, that the balance of both man and machine are critical. And here's my philosophy behind that. I truly believe that what we do at the front end of the process is a balance of both logic and creativity. And I'm going to talk about these a little bit more in detail. But logic is really having that strong technical aptitude to be able to take all of the new technologies that are coming in and learn new recruiting tools quickly and constantly keep an eye on the market of where you're going to find the best passive and active candidates and what the best market intelligence is to help you tell that story. And then creativity is the ability to take that information and create a research strategy that targets the right candidates from the start of the process, so you're not just dealing with really vague candidates, but you're actually targeting candidates that are applicable for the role, and then using the tools in a way that no one else does. And so some of the errors that I see companies making when it comes to that front end of the recruiting process is one thing that they do is they focus too much on logic. And a great example of this, we actually had a really well-known client recently at Novo, and they came to us to engage our research and sourcing team because they were struggling to find fresh talent for their challenging engineering roles. Now here's the most amazing thing about that client. This client had $1 million tool budget a year. And every one of their recruiters was LinkedIn certified, LinkedIn Recruiter Pro certified. Every one of their recruiters was AIR certified. They invested all this money and all of these resources up front into the logic side, and they didn't allow anyone to have the side to use those tools in a creative fashion in a new and a fresh way. So after spending all that money and all those resources on the logic side, they had to engage Novo to help to allow us to be creative. And the feedback we received from them is that we found talent that they were missing in the marketplace. So I use this philosophy when I'm hiring my team for the front end of the process, is that we have to have a balance of both logic and creativity. I look for people who have a strong technical aptitude, but also have the ability to be creative. A standard line I use when hiring people is I look for people who are excited when a recruiter or a hiring manager comes to them and says, we've tapped out the marketplace or we've tapped out that tool. That's when I want my team to get excited and think of new and creative ways to find candidates. So let's dive in a little bit more about how Novo balances both logic and creativity. And so the first thing that we realized, and our CEO is a full supporter of this, that we had to have separate skill sets or separate skill sets and career paths for researchers and recruiters. And so we allow researchers and sourcers to grow in their own career path and what they're good at, and we allow recruiters to grow at their own in their own career path. And one big mistake I see a lot of companies making in this area is what they try to do is they try to make the recruiter be everything, the researcher, the sourcer, and the process-driven recruiter. And really, you have to have, I found that these people have different personality sets and a lot of times different skill sets. And so we've separated out their career paths to allow research and sourcing to kind of grow in its own career path and then work hand in hand with our recruiters. And so at Novo, we have two separate career paths for researchers and recruiters, but we champion the relationship between the two. And it really allows for them to grow in their respective skill sets and be really good at what they're good at. So defining logic a little bit more is logic is a combination of both paid and manual tools. And so I think all of those Boolean trainings, I think trainings on giving people consistent training on how to pick tools apart and get creative with the use of tools is a big part of logic. And so we don't, at Novo, we don't believe in just one or two paid tools to find our passive and active candidates or our market intelligence. We currently, and this number is not an exaggeration, but we have 25 to 30 current tools that we use to find both passive and active candidates, and market intelligence is included in that as well. And my vision for the research and sourcing team at Novo is that we have a group of people who are trained in an advanced fashion and who are consistently keeping their eyes on the market to add new tools and get rid of old ones. And so when I say get rid of old ones, I mean get rid of ones that are no longer producing great passive and active candidates. So this is really the logic piece. This is having a great set of tools and a diverse set of tools that actually work to find the best passive and active candidates. On the creativity side, the first thing that we have at Novo and the first thing that I really believe kind of breeds creativity for your organization is that we have a diverse research team with multiple skill sets. And so I have a couple people on my team that are entry level, just learning the industry, and they're starting in research and sourcing. I have people who are seasoned, 10 to 15 plus years in full cycle recruiting who have a strong technical aptitude, and they've transitioned over to the research and sourcing team, and they have an incredible way to view passive candidates, to view quality candidates and profiles, and to really have that recruiter mindset when it comes to looking at profiles. And then I also have people on my team who are 10 to 15 plus years in research and on the research side really in market intelligence, and they specialize in really being able to take a deep dive like you wouldn't believe. And it creates this really great diverse team with multiple skill sets. And we have weekly team meetings and people reach out to each other consistently. And so we have this great organic mindset where people are able to consistently learn and push each other to gain creativity and kind of combine it with that logic piece. We also have weekly training and challenges that support comprehensive learning and development. And instead of doing all-day trainings, we really do little bite-sized chunks of training weekly, so people actually have a chance to learn something, focus on that one thing, and then roll it out and begin using it in their search methodologies. And then we also have clear expectations when it comes to metrics and tracking, as well as the amount of tools that we're using. And so what I mean there, and sometimes this is the biggest challenging part of what we do, and I'm sure I'll get some offline questions about this, but recruiting metrics are easy. In recruiting, it's did you get the fill or not. In sourcing and research in the front end of the process, sometimes that's a little bit more challenging. And so at Novo, we've developed clear expectations around the amount of passive candidates you can locate per hour, how many sources and how many tools you use, and then how many pieces of market intelligence you've contributed to the search. And all of these things really allow us to consistently be thinking of using tools differently. And I put out some YouTube videos from time to time on tools and training, and sometimes people ask me, aren't you worried about giving away the secret sauce, or aren't you worried about giving away the way that you do things? And in my mindset, I can train people on tools all day, but they really have to be able to think creatively to use those tools in a new way that no one else is using them. And so that's something that we do here at Novo. So the last piece I kind of wanted to talk about, and some of you are sending in some questions. We'll try to get to some of those here at the end. But the last thing I want to talk about is just a little side note before I hand it over to Alex about market data. And so market data is really challenging. And some of those questions that come up that we talked about a little bit at the beginning of, what tools do you use, and how do you clean up the data, and how do you effectively communicate the data? And what I've realized, my eyes have been big on market data this year, is that market data can really transform and support your recruitment and your sourcing strategy, and it really helps you create some efficiencies, improve accuracy, and then support some of those hiring manager conversations that you might be having. And so we've looked at new and exciting ways to implement this here at Novo. And just some things that I've really begun to think about when I break it down to logic and creativity is you really have to look at the difference between supporting tools for market intelligence and then that one perfect tool. So like I said, there's going to be companies that come to you and say, this is that one perfect tool for market intelligence. I don't really believe that. I actually believe that you need to use supporting tools. And so Novo actually has 5 different tools that we use for market intelligence. And it really helps us to paint this picture of a story that we can take to our hiring manager. We're actually finalizing a template that we also will be using to really copy and paste from those different tools into one template and have this great presentable document for our hiring managers and our internal recruiters. But we use several different tools to help us paint a more accurate market intelligence story. So that's one way we've gotten creative with it. And then we also apply market intelligence to every single search, and so it looks different on every single search. For some searches, you need to focus more on competition. For others, more on salary. For others, more on years of experience or maybe hotbed geographic areas. And so you can't just look for a blanket approach, but you have to be able to tailor that to every single search that you do. I'm going to let Alex talk a little bit more now about ZoomInfo, but ZoomInfo is a cool example for Novo when it comes to market intelligence. So when we purchased seats for ZoomInfo for our research and sourcing team, we actually purchased them to help us find better passive candidates and be another great passive candidate tool. And then one of the things I always encourage my team to do is pick apart every tool we have so we can use it in new ways that people aren't using it, as I kind of talked about before. And what we realized with ZoomInfo is it's not just a great tool for passive candidates and passive candidate contact information, but it also is a really great tool for market intelligence. And so as we were picking that apart, we found great breakdowns of industry, sub-industries, company information, company descriptions, financial information about companies. And so we actually have been able to use that as one of those 5 tools that kind of helps us to paint a great market intelligence story based on industry and company breakdown. In addition, we've been able to add over 2,000 candidates in just 4 months that have come directly from ZoomInfo. And a lot of these candidates weren't on LinkedIn and weren't on some of the big boards. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit more in another webinar I do for ZoomInfo later this year. But that's just an example of how that's helped us to paint some of the market intelligence information. So, Alex, I'll go ahead and hand it over to you now.
Thanks, Tony. Really appreciate it. Great job, and I think I speak for all of us when I've had a really great experience with you, and you added a lot of insight that I found interesting that I actually didn't even know and wasn't aware of. So, thanks for joining us, guys. Tony did a great job, but I'm going to do a quick high-level overview. I know Ashley introduced ZoomInfo and kind of what we do and what we're all about. And for anybody who wants to get a more in-depth look at the platform, I'm happy to talk to you on a one-off basis. ZoomInfo has a number of different tools that helps the recruiter in recruiting and sourcing teams identify, find passive candidates, and then provide them with the contact information for those individuals. But as Tony says, we don't claim to be any kind of magic bullet tool, right? We want to work our platform into your daily workflow to make searching, sourcing candidates, and reaching out to those candidates as easy as possible. So one of the really cool things that I'm going to plug right now is something that we just introduced a couple of months ago. Tony actually, before the webinar, was surprised that we even had this. So we have introduced a LinkedIn plugin. It's a free plugin that comes with a subscription. And essentially what ZoomInfo wants to say is, hey, we don't want to replace any tools. I honestly think LinkedIn is a great tool. I use it myself every day. I think when we're talking about logic and creativity, some of that creativity comes when you're reaching out to passive candidates is that social data. So being able to look into somebody's LinkedIn profile, seeing where they've been, who they're connected with, some of their skills, and using that into your outreach is highly useful. But at the end of the day, ZoomInfo is in business because we want to be able to get you in contact with these passive candidates. So as you can see right here, I pulled up Tony's LinkedIn, and on the top right of my screen, you can see a little pulsating icon. Now this is the ZoomInfo plugin. It's called Reach Out. We see a little profile, and we can say, yep, Tony, he still is the recruitment technology manager for the Novo Group, and I can go ahead and press get contact information. So as I'm in my day-to-day workflow, when I'm in LinkedIn doing some social selling, reaching out to some of my network, I can actually pull up Tony's direct contact information, his email address, direct dial phone number, and his HQ number, all live while I'm in my LinkedIn tool, so I don't have to go back and forth in between different tools. And then we also give you the ability to email this contact information to yourself, so you'll always have it. And then if you are a Salesforce.com user, we give you the ability to export that information as well. It'll be transferred into your Salesforce as a lead on demand. So that's one of the ways that we try to work our tool into your daily workflow. And like we were saying earlier, it's not about a magic bullet or one tool or another. It's really about, ZoomInfo is here to provide contact data and to make sure you're able to reach out to those passive candidates and get in contact with them directly. Because I know a lot of the times people, send in-mails or they try to call through an HQ number, or they're wasting their time scraping and guessing emails that have some kind of email format that that we've matched to other people's emails. So ZoomInfo has on-demand access to millions of contacts, as Ashley said, and we're constantly updating records. So this is how we're able to help a group like the Novo Group find 2,000 new candidates on their talent pipeline in only 4 months. A fun little fact, one of my colleagues told me the other day, 99% of the usage on LinkedIn is actually only produced by 1% of the users. If you think about it, a lot of these high-level executives, they have LinkedIn profiles, but it's not on their priority list to go in there and update their profile or their job description or their expertise. They got a lot more stuff going on. So ZoomInfo has an unbiased look into data and contact information and the people that are out there. To give you a little preview of what we do, essentially we have a community of users that use the platform for free, and there's a signature block sharing that goes on. So we have about 500,000 people that download a plugin into their email address, and we're actually able to capture all the signature blocks on all their oncoming emails. And this is how we're able to get an unbiased view of candidates that are out there, and we're not looking for people on social media sites or anything like that. And this is how we're able to give a group like the Novo Group insight into who else is out there, and then provide them with that direct contact information so they can call them up on their direct dial phone number or send them an email to their corporate email address, and offer them position or source the information that they need to source. So lastly, I want to do just a quick recap, and again, I thank you all for joining us. We really want to stay balanced between 50% creativity and 50% logic. As Tony said, there's a million tools out there, and you want to be able to get your message out there, but you want to do it creatively and logically. It's not one way or the other. We want to make sure that, we find a nice balance. And the recruiting world is highly, highly competitive, and we want to make sure that we use everything we can do and be constantly learning in order to kind of perfect our craft and make sure that we're the best recruiter out there. So we also want to maximize operational efficiencies and workflow by identifying the right technologies. And as Tony said, there are a million technologies out there, and we want to evolve with the market. We can't only use, one tool like LinkedIn or another tool like some people tell me they only use Google. We want to get kind of a stack of tools that can make our job more efficient and effective day to day to make sure that we're not wasting any time go only searching through one pool of candidates when there's a whole other pool out there for you to view. And we want to identify the right partner that helps streamline candidates in sourcing and marketing research efforts for our own team. Now, I know ZoomInfo isn't the solution for everybody. I think direct contact information is essential, but sometimes people are looking for a highly, highly targeted list of candidates, or passive candidates aren't for them, or they only need to fill 1 or 2 roles a year. So when I worked with Tony, and as Ashley said in the beginning of the webinar, I really focus on problem sales. I want to identify the problem that a company or person is having, and then I want to present the solution that ZoomInfo might be able to provide, but that isn't always the case with everybody. So I encourage you to test out tools like ZoomInfo or LinkedIn or other tools out there to help you find kind of your sweet spot of your stack of tools to be able to source these kind of candidates. And just ever be evolving and just make sure that you're not complacent with the tools that you're currently using, because that's going to make you the best sourcer out there. And by doing all of this, we think that man learns how to conquer the world by balancing this logic, creativity, man versus machine idea to make sure that everything that we're doing is in the best flow possible, using the best tools possible for us. So I'm going to pass it off for any questions that you guys may have. If you have questions, you can either ask us directly through On24, and I know that we've gotten a few throughout this webinar. You can also reach out to us on ZoomInfo, #ZoomInfoWebinar on Twitter, and then everybody's going to receive a recording within the next 48 hours in order to rewatch the webinar, or you can ask questions directly to us.
So thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I want to give a special shout-out to Tony and the Novo Group for partnering with ZoomInfo. At this time, they're going to take a couple minutes to just review the questions and see if they're able to answer any live. Otherwise, I know we are at 2 o'clock, so we do want to be considerate of your time. So if we do not have a chance to address your questions, we will be able to respond to you via email. But again, thank you, Alex and Tony, and thank you guys for joining us. We will be having another webinar in the fall with Tony, and we're really excited about that and all that he has to offer. So again, Alex or Tony, if there are any questions that you're able to quickly address, feel free to. Otherwise, we will be sure to follow up with you shortly.
Yeah, this is Tony. So I'll address a couple of the questions from the question and answer period, and then as Ashley said, please email me anytime. I'm more than happy to help as much as I can. So what's the average age of your sourcing or research team is one of the questions, and that's really hard to tell because we literally range anywhere between, I will say, 24 and 50 on our team. So we actually have, when I said we have a diverse team, I really meant it, and I see value in everyone coming in at different age groups as long as they have that technical aptitude and creativity. Let me see here. What's the most important tool a person can use to recruit? I would have, that question came from Mario. I would have a really hard time saying that there's one tool out there that a person could use for successful recruiting. If you were limited to one tool, just for the sake of the question, I would say one that pulls from a diverse amount of resources and isn't just reluctant or reliable on their one database. But really the best methods you can use is approaching tools that are applicable to your industry or that are going to help you to find the most passive and active candidates. And really that's a consistent process, as I mentioned in the webinar, of finding what those tools are and then learning them and putting them into use by your team. Let me see if I can maybe take one more, Ashley, if that's okay. What do you feel is the best tool for gathering market intelligence? That's a challenging one. There are some bigger bucket tools that specialize in market intelligence. I know we've had a lot of success with Career Builder's supply and demand tool. I've had success in the past with Wanted Analytics. Those are going to be more of your big bucket paid tools. As I mentioned on the call, ZoomInfo has been really helpful with breaking down industry information. A lot of times I can keep it as simple as one of the tools I use I'll go out to Indeed and write because they have a lot of job postings, I'll write an intricate Boolean string like I was searching for candidates, but I'll just use the Indeed job board and it'll pull back companies that are hiring similar positions, and I'll just pull companies from that list and titles from that list, and it'll help me kind of hone in my search a little bit more there as well. So that's just an example of several different tools you can use, and like I said, you really have to be able to hone in on what tools are going to be applicable for that specific search that you're working on.
And I'm just going to step in really quick, Tony, because I'm also getting a lot of questions about ZoomInfo and costs and what's included with the product. If anybody is interested in getting access to the tool, we'll be giving everybody that came to the webinar some free trial access for about a week so they can go into the tool and see what we have to offer. And we'll also give everybody access to the reach out functionality so they can play around with that as well. And then again, we'll send out, we have our contact information within the webinar, and you guys will be getting the recording. So if anybody has direct questions about ZoomInfo or the product or anything like that, they can feel free to reach out to me directly, and I'm happy to answer any and all questions.
All right.
And I will say as kind of, oops, I'm sorry. I will say as a side note to that, Alex has been really great to work with, and I told him at the beginning I'm not doing this for any sense of a shameless plug for ZoomInfo or whatever you want to call it, but the reality is Alex actually listened to our needs, and I find with a lot of sales reps, they're just trying to push product, and I shared the example of one account executive really just trying to get me to spend $200,000 on one product this year. But with Alex, he actually listened to my needs, come up with a solution that fit our budget and one that made sense for our team. And that's why I've been a big proponent of ZoomInfo, in addition to the great tool and the great information you get. But he is consistently working with us to make sure it continues to make sense for Novo, and that's really important to me.
Well, thank you, Tony. Very humbling. Ashley, you want to wrap up?
Yeah, absolutely. So thank you again, Tony and Alex, for doing a great job. Thank you for the kind words, Tony. I completely agree. I've seen Alex and you work together, and it's been really amazing. Again, if our questions haven't been addressed, we will certainly answer them and follow up with you, and we will be sure to reach out to you in 48 hours with the PowerPoint presentation. And thank you for joining us and your time, and we look forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you.